Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on retention strategies. I'm Hannah Booth, Content and Communications Manager here at MorePay. We've got lots to cover in this morning's session, so we'll get started with some housekeeping before moving into the main presentation. So in terms of the agenda for this morning, Michelle will start off by looking at the 3 R's of retention: respect, recognition, and reward. She'll then discuss the real cost of employee turnover and how to measure your retention rate. Finally, Michelle will examine the critical role that HR has to play in boosting retention. And as usual, we'll have a live Q&A session at the end of the main presentation where you'll have an opportunity to ask Michelle any questions. So in terms of asking questions, you may have noticed that your microphone is on mute, but you can drop questions into the question panel as shown here. So throughout the session, if you think of a question, drop it in and then we'll cover them at the end. We have had over 750 people register for the webinar, so I do imagine we'll have lots of questions, but we'll do our best to get through as many as we can at the end of the session. Don't worry if you do face any technical difficulties, because we will be sending everyone a recording and a copy of the slides later on today. So if you just take a moment to familiarise yourselves with the audio settings as displayed here. And before we get started, I will give you a brief introduction to MorePay in case there's anybody on the webinar that's not familiar with us. We provide payroll and HR software as well as outsourcing services to UK businesses. We've been around since 1966 and have all the accreditations you'd expect. Our promise is to make payroll and HR easy, and here's how we do it. We've built payroll and HR software that's easy to use. We deliver quality outsourcing options, and all of this means worry-free compliance for businesses. On the slide, you can see some of the businesses who trust us to take care of their payroll and HR. And did we mention we're award-winning? On this slide, you can see some of the industry awards and shortlists we've picked up over the last couple of years. And if you'd like to find out more about us, you can simply drop me a message in the Q&A panel and one of my colleagues will contact you. So that's enough about MorePay. Let's meet today's presenter. If you've joined our webinars before, then I'm sure you'll be familiar with Michelle. She's our HR Services Director and has been with MorePay since 2017. She's CIPD qualified with over 20 years of both operational and strategic HR experience. Michelle is responsible for running all HR services activities within MorePay. Good morning, Michelle. I'll now hand you over to Michelle to take you through this morning's webinar.
Thank you so much, Hannah, and thank you everyone for joining this morning. So retention, as with most topics we discuss on these webinars, for those of you who've joined us before, is a huge topic. But we want to give you, as HR and business leaders, an overview of the topic and some of the key things that you should think about when looking at retention. And the start of that is talking about what is called the 3 R's of retention. So if you go on to the next slide, then this is about the basics of retention. Retention in general, it's all about building a culture. People want to feel respected, they want to feel valued, they want to feel they've got the opportunity and encouraged to grow. And that really comes to 3 areas, and we're going to go into each one in a bit more detail, but they are at a high level: respect, about respecting employees' time and their contribution to the organisation; recognise, so recognition around their achievements and ensuring that that's done regularly; and then the last R is reward, that people are rewarded for success fairly through pay, development and flexibility. So if we go on to talk about each of these in a little bit more detail, the first one we're going to talk about is respect. And this is all about understanding how employers can create a workplace where it's the norm for everyone to treat each other with mutual respect, and that's right throughout the organisation. Respect is really a basic foundation of creating a culture where people want to stay and where they want to thrive. Respect is about being explicit that respect is an organisational value. You need to agree and communicate to all your employees what those expectations of behaviour is for conduct, for treatment. Ensure that these are followed right from the top of the organisation, led by example, and that they are filtered right down to the bottom of the organisation. Have clear policies and procedures that support the health, safety, well-being and development of your employees, and respect really lies at the heart of that. It's about making sure that your employees do feel safe to raise a concern or an issue, and they feel that they're in an environment where they can, if there is something that's gone wrong. And then a very important part of this is ensuring that your managers have the necessary tools, training, and can deal with these situations. They exhibit the behaviour that is needed to show employees that they are treated well and that they expect their employees to follow the same format. The impact of this then, of having respect throughout the culture of your organisation, it really drives just trust and open communication. It creates what we would call a psychological safety, and that kind of behaviour fuels innovation, productivity, engagement within your organisation. And the truth is that people who feel valued for who they are and what they contribute to the organisation are far more likely to stay with you. And when respect is present in an organisation, performance overall improves. So the next one of the 3 R's then is around recognition. And it's about recognise your employees. Not only benefits the individual, but it also helps the organisation reduce turnover and retain talent. And one thing I would say here is that I think expectations of employees are changing and evolving. And something like we've just talked about around respect, it's the same for recognition. It's far more important than it ever has been. And in some ways, recognition is linked to that respect. People feel respected when they are recognised. So they're all very interchangeable. But with recognition, this means recognition that is truly genuine. It's actually meant, and it just becomes a norm within the organisation. That's the key to making this work. So recognition is about recognising contribution that your employees make in your organisation. And it's thinking of ways that you can do this where they are going to feel valued for it. They're less likely to feel appreciated if they're not receiving, what we've described as honest, meaningful, genuine, or direct feedback. And I think one of the things that I would call out as a tip really is avoid vague or general praise, because it can feel disingenuous or performative, and it can create feelings of demotion. So when you're thinking about recognition, think about how you can recognise individuals in different ways that's going to be meaningful for them and make them feel like they belong in this organisation and the organisation values what they do. There are so many ways that you can look at recognising employees. The key is making sure that this is not a tick box exercise, that you are doing this for the long term, continuously. And I would say that variety is key here, having a variety of ways that you recognise employees. You could look at things like Employee of the Month awards, whether or that is linked to some kind of pay or vouchers or gift, but there could be Employees of the Month. You can look at performance bonuses, so bonuses, whether they're annual, quarter, that are based actually on the performance of the individual, which ultimately helps the performance of the organisation. Think about long service awards. They are still areas that are valued by employees in terms of feeling that they've been recognised for the length of service. Although the workforce is changing, and I think it will continue to change over the coming years, where people do move jobs more to gain more experience. That definitely brings some benefits. But for those people who have been in the organisation for a long time, recognising that contribution can really go a long way. One thing that can be really powerful is peer-to-peer recognition and allowing colleagues to recognise each other, even if that is just a kind of a formal way or a way that shows other people that they just want to say thank you to that person for helping them. It could even be something small. Within our own business at MorePay, we have a recognition platform that allows any colleagues to go on there and do a shout out and a thank you to anybody else in the business. It's not just the managers telling employees thank you, it is peer-to-peer as well. Kind of, I'm sure some of you have seen things like this, but it looks a little bit like a social media feed. You can add a GIF and you can just say, thanks for helping me out the other day with that customer when I had a tricky situation. that kind of thing goes really well because it feels genuine when it's peer-to-peer. And then that's the sort of thing you as managers can pick up with your employees, even if you just say, oh, I noticed that somebody else had recognised you for that piece of work, well done. You could comment on that. Even if you don't have that formal tool, coming up with some way of allowing peer-to-peer recognition can be really powerful. Never underestimate the verbal praise of just saying thank you, whether that's just thank you to the individual or thank you in front of other people. They are things that are really, really powerful, and people still crave that kind of recognition and that human contact of being told they've done a good job. And the last thing I would say in terms of thinking about the variety of ways you can do it is don't wait for those big accomplishments. Really do go with the idea that every little milestone matters. And I think this is the key when I said before about recognition, whether that's manager to employee or peer-to-peer, that just becomes part of your norm and part of your culture. It truly works when you recognise the little milestones as well as the big ones. In terms of statistics then, from the 2025 Global Culture Report, employees who feel recognised are 8 times more likely to feel a sense of belonging to that organisation. And because of that, they're 5 times more likely to stay for at least 2 or more years. So the final one of the R's then is around reward. When we talk about reward, though, this, remember, is beyond just basic pay. Reward is such a bigger concept than just the basic pay that an individual gets. And the best approach to this is thinking about a diverse strategy of reward. Fair and competitive pay is absolutely vital, and it's often one of the top factors employees consider when they think about whether they are going to stay in a current role or leave to go to a better, what they might deem a better role. But they will look at their total rewards package and everything that comes with it. And often businesses now, if an employee is thinking of leaving and they're saying, well, I'm leaving because I'm going to get X amount more on my base salary. If you've got a reward package that sits around that is bigger and better, and in terms of benefits, in terms of opportunities, in terms of support, that's the sort of thing that happens. But under reward, salary really does matter, but retention around reward just goes so much deeper. And having a really strong reward strategy that is as open, as honest as you can make it, looks at things like competitive pay in the marketplace and making sure that pay is in line with the marketplace. Think about the benefits package that you've got that goes with it and how you can offer enough benefits that it can feel like it is personalised and tailored for that individual. Every individual in your organisation will have different wants and needs when it comes to benefits, and having a wide variety of personalised benefits that they can pick and choose really helps. And then another thing that is really gaining traction is support for well-being in general and helping your employees build financial resilience. I think the financial well-being is a huge part of a reward strategy now, and is something that we should think about more than ever. You think about what we've been through over the last few years with the pandemic, the cost of living crisis. People are looking at what their basic salary gives them, but what their reward package gives them beyond that to help them with their financial wellness. It is also about education and support when they need it. You may have seen recently that Azelis, who are our parent company, have acquired a business called Hasty Pay, and this is about giving employees earned wage access. So it's very early days of this new business in ours, but watch this space, because earned wage access gives employees the chance to draw down the money that they have already earned rather than wait until the end of the month. There's lots of information that goes around that, but I think it's a really important part of financial wellbeing, and I think we'll see a lot more of it in the future. And then I think in general, rewards signals appreciation and investment in people's future. Do remember that not all rewards are financial, so we can think beyond the financial impact. There can be rewards that sit around good performance management, opportunities for personal and career development, flexible working, and then I've talked about things like employee of the month, and whether that is just something that you give or you give a monetary reward to it. There might be different ways that you can look on it. And as I've already said, well-being is a big part of the overall reward strategy. 93% of global employees have said that well-being can be just as important as salary, and 87% would consider leaving a company that does not prioritise the well-being of their employees. So when you think about perks like cycle to work scheme, cashbacks, discount, health support, the earned wage access, this is all about showing employees that you care about their overall well-being and that it's in a genuine way. Moving on then to talk really about the cost of turnover and looking in a bit more detail about how to measure turnover, what if there is such a good thing as good turnover looks like, but also how to get the balance right. So turnover rate is essentially calculating the proportion of employees that have left their job as a percentage of all your employees in the same time period. So this is known as your turnover rate. And just for reference, the average turnover across all industries in the UK currently sits at 34%. This will widely vary by industry, by type of business, by size of business. So I think it'd be important that if you're looking at what you would like to benchmark your own retention rate at, that you do some research. You will find loads of examples on the internet of where you'll see what your industry or size of business may be. So do look at that. But the overall UK average is 34%. So maybe an obvious question, but covering it as part of this, why it's important to measure your turnover. I think it's important to understand that people leave organisations for many reasons, so including things like lack of career progression, poor work-life balance, attraction of a new job. There are countless reasons why people leave. It's important to know that they have left, what that rate is within your own organisation. But I think we also need to bear in mind that it's important to understand why people have left, to truly understand the impact it's having on your organisation. Although there's a little bit of a case of shutting the door once the horse has bolted, I am still a huge advocate for exit interviews, because that will shape your strategy on retention going forward. When people have left the organisation, truly understanding why they left and maybe what a difference you can make to the people who are still there is really important. So gathering that data, obviously use that to sit alongside things like employee engagement surveys to find out how the people who actually are here feel. You may be able to address any issues to stop them even thinking about leaving. But once they've left, really encouraged to do things like exit interviews. But I think one of the other things is for HR teams and for business leaders, turnover should really be part of a performance or success metric. When you're looking at your KPIs of your organisation, I really do believe that this is a key one. And getting that balance right of retention and keeping it in a low place, but not too low, and I'll come on to that in a second, is really important. So we've said here that really look at retention as a business critical metric. It helps pinpoint areas, whether that's poor onboarding, lack of progression. There might even be particular departments or teams where the turnover is higher. It allows you to get down to that granular detail. It will give you an idea of how well your culture, leadership, benefits are working. If your retention rates are really high, there is something that is not working and you need to get to the bottom of it. But as with everything, data is key, and it will help you and inform you in making the right decisions. It will also help in the future when you're looking at budgets and forecasting around recruitment and headcount. Having this information, being ahead of the game, just makes this all more effective. So we've got here how you measure retention effectively. So a retention rate is basically employees at the end of a period minus new starters divided by the employees at the start of the period, and then timesing it by 100 to get the percentage. So the example here is you start with 120 staff, you end with 110, you've had 15 new hires, and you'll see in there, and you will get a copy of these slides, so don't worry too much about writing this down, and I'm sure you can get the information to follow through on this to work out your retention rate. But in this example here, it comes out with the retention rate of 79.2. Where I said before about the average turnover being 34%, it's kind of the flip of that, if you want to look at it in a little bit more detail. So continuing then with the cost of turnover. When you're considering measuring the financial costs that turnover brings, think about things like the administration of resignations. So when someone leaves, there is a trigger of an admin process that needs to happen to get that leaver offboarded from the organisation. The other sorts of things that come into play are recruitment and selection costs. What cover do you need during the vacancy period, bearing in mind that you may not get someone straight away? Think about the costs and the time and the resource for induction and training of the new employee. And in general, think about the loss of the knowledge and the team disruption. In terms of how much turnover costs an organisation, this is just to give you an idea of some agency costs. So for jobs that are paying less than £30,000 a year, it generally costs around 16% of an annual salary to replace a staff member. But for higher paid jobs between 30 and 50, it's about 20% of the annual salary. And for higher paid executive positions, you could have a huge percentage of their salary that you are paying to go through a headhunter. So do that, bear that in mind. In terms of cost of letting people go, every resignation comes at a cost, and do bear that in mind. And turnover in general can just affect, or obviously it'll affect productivity if you don't have people there. It'll affect your culture, and it will ultimately affect your bottom line. So measuring retention really helps you make smart, people-focused decisions. But as with everything, there is a balance. And it's important to point out here that not all churn is bad. Getting that balance is key. Monitoring churn, knowing the churn rate, and knowing what the data means behind it will allow you to decide what actions to take. So if your churn is too high, it will give you disruption, there'll be costs, there'll be low morale. But if your churn is too low, there is a risk of stagnation, of missed innovation, of not bringing in new skills and experience. What is classified as a healthy churn rate will depend on your industry and size of organisation. But there is always the side that some churn is necessary in a business. It will help bring fresh perspectives, new ideas, new experience that comes from outside your organisation. It will help you build stronger and more diverse teams. And it will show overall signs of growth and progress for your organisation. So just bear in mind that when we're talking about this topic overall, we are not saying that all churn is bad. There needs to be some churn to keep an organisation healthy, but you need to keep an eye on making sure that it doesn't get too high. And finding that balance will be really important for you, but it's going to be really different based on your organisation. We don't have a magic number that says if you get churn at this rate, this is the same for everybody. You'll need to do a bit more research on that and how that will help going forward. So now moving on to focusing on HR and the role that HR play in boosting retention and why we can make a difference. But I do want to say this at the same time as remembering that it is not solely the responsibility of HR. It is a collective organisation responsibility. But HR, it says here, they can really be the architects of retention. HR is a support function that has gone on a huge journey over the past 20 or so years in terms of what they are there to do, how they can support the organisation, and how they can take the organisation forward. But I would say that HR really now does have a seat at the table and can influence different initiatives related to business success. So HR does have a seat at the table, and we as a function can help shape the touch points of an employee life cycle from onboarding to exit, and that has a really key part in terms of retention. It helps if we can turn policies into people-first experiences. There is so much around compliance and employment law legislation that HR departments need to take into account when writing policies and procedures. But at the heart of it, their people should be the forefront of their minds in terms of people-led policies that are benefiting their people, not just there to be compliant. And that can be quite a tricky balance to get sometimes, but it is doable. And then in general, it is about how HR help provide data-driven insights to the leaders in their organisation. And I would say that HCM and HR software is absolutely critical to this, because having the data that is fixed, that is automated, that allows you to know that data is correct, and then support that with a narrative behind it and the detail of what that data means. It's a really powerful combination, and HR can take that forward. So in terms of giving you a few areas to consider, HR strategies are there to boost employee experience. And one of the things that you consider is having a strong onboarding process. The first few weeks of an employee's experience really do help shape the whole lifetime experience going forward. So working on that up front and making people feel welcome. You know, you hear stories of people starting in an organisation where they've just literally been left to sit at a desk and told to crack on without meeting people, without being introduced to people, without even being walked around the office. Really simple, basic things. I think there's a lot to be gained from thinking about the onboarding, and a clear, welcomed and really well planned induction can help people settle in, feel connected and just get off on the right foot. Another big area to look at is line manager capability. Managers have such a big and direct impact on employees' day-to-day experience, and training them to communicate well, lead with empathy, support development, act in the right way, it's all going to help to boost retention and engagement of employees. And it's all about helping them to lead by example and also to lead with confidence. So think about the investment that you're going to put into helping line managers achieve these things. And then think about work-life balance, how this as an HR strategy can help with attraction and retention. So potentially giving people the freedom to adjust working hours around their home life, that can increase employee motivation and satisfaction. But flexibility doesn't have to just be about reduction in working hours. It could be changes in start and finish time, longer lunch breaks, changing day-to-day business tasks. One thing I will call out here is the big debate at the moment over work from home. It's far too big a topic to talk about now, and maybe one for its own webinar. But there's been such a shift over the last 5 or 6 years, from pre-COVID to during COVID to now. There is still quite a big push for hybrid working, but we are certainly seeing more organisations asking employees to come back in the office for 5 days a week, and that has some pros and some cons. And the only thing I would say, excuse me, the only thing I would say here is remember the benefits that flexibility can bring, and also remember the changing expectations of the generations of the workforce that are coming through. And it's about being agile and adapting that, and potentially thinking not one size fits all. As I said, huge topic to debate, and maybe one for another webinar. But it is important to bear it in mind when you're thinking about retention strategies. On to the next points then, around further strategies to boost employee experience. And I just want to talk quickly about culture and paths of progression. So culture is about having a set of values that your organisation stands by and employees can truly buy into. And it's a really key part to be able to convey to your employees what your organisation stands for. Things like conducting employee surveys allows you to capture how your employees are feeling about the organisation overall, and how they feel about the values that your organisation stands for. And it can help you use that information to adapt your values or change your approach to your culture. I think with employee surveys, you are able really to find out if employees are satisfied or dissatisfied, and it gives you a chance to come up with a solution. There are many different ways that you can do employee surveys. Think about the frequency that you can do this. We've seen a real shift over the past few years from what was originally the traditional annual employee survey to be more frequent, short bursts, pulse surveys. really taking a temperature check of how the organisation are. When you do these things, though, to help with the culture of your organisation, make sure that they are followed through with an action plan, and that you are taking this information, relaying it back to your employees, and coming up with what you are going to do about areas of concern. It's also really worth investing in development opportunities where you can, and providing people with paths of progression, development and opportunities for the future. And it's true that in a lot of cases, if employees are unable to see some kind of clear career path, they may be tempted to look elsewhere. It might not be just going to the next role. There are other things that you can do to help their development. So think about personal development plans, training, exposure to other areas of the business. Consider offering them support to take on training with other departments. And in a situation where promotions are not feasible, are there sideways moves or secondments that allow employees to gain some kind of different experience? But as with most things with career progression development, just be as open and as transparent as you can be. On to the summary then, before we go to Q&A. It is really important to have some kind of retention strategy in place in your organisation. It will allow you to understand what's happening in your organisation, understand who's leaving, what areas they're leaving from, and then from things like exit interviews, you can understand why they're leaving, so you can do something about it. And having that strategy in place will give your business some real tangible benefits. So it will do things like it will save you on costs. Keeping skilled employees means you don't have to spend more money, time, resource on getting new people hired into the business and trained up in that area. It has a direct impact on the business performance through productivity. So experienced employees are usually more efficient at the work and used to the processes, tools, the way things are done, which will overall boost productivity levels in your organisation. Even if employees are staying, if they are seeing a high turnover rate around them, they will start to feel potentially demotivated themselves, and expectations that more work is on them because there is such a high turnover rate. So it affects the people who stay as well as the people who've left. And then overall, if you tie all this together, it can really help improve customer experience. If you've got your retention strategy right, it means that you can allow your employees to provide a more consistent experience to customers to support them with a greater knowledge of depth, which will overall, again, benefit your organisation. So lots to think about in terms of retention. I hope that this has been useful in giving you an overview of where to consider, and more than happy to take questions now. So I'll ask Hannah to come back on.
Thanks, Michelle. That was a really thought-provoking session, and we have had quite a few questions come in. So the first question, is it a good idea to incentivise loyalty through long service awards?
Can be maybe a little bit of a controversial topic, but it is something that has been around for quite a long time, and I think there is enough data to show that there are benefits around coming up with some kind of long service award and showing the business that you are recognising employees and valuing their contribution over a period of time. It may encourage people to stay. I'm quite an advocate of these, and it doesn't even have to be monetary awards. It can be gifts, it could be extra holidays in that year. I think there's a lot of research out there on the benefits of having long service awards and recognising the contribution of that loyalty. So I think it's definitely an area that could be considered by businesses.
Thank you. So next question, how can smaller businesses compete with larger businesses to retain their employees?
That is always a difficult one, because often larger organisations have much more, many resources available at their fingertips that smaller organisations don't. But there can be benefits to being in a smaller organisation. And I think that's really key, that when smaller organisations are recruiting and they're thinking about their recruitment process, that they think about the value that they can add to an employee and then continue that throughout their life cycle. So whilst they may not have as huge a benefits package as a larger organisation, it is still possible to get benefits package, and there are some great options out there for smaller businesses. I think there's a benefit though in working for that small organisation. If you think about the non-monetary benefits, we talked about recognition and opportunities. In a smaller organisation, there might be the chance that the employees have a bigger impact on what they're doing because they're closer to the leadership team, or they're just exposed to more things because there's bigger expectations to do maybe more than one role. I think it would be really important for a smaller organisation to look at those kind of benefits. Talk to your employees that you've got now. If you haven't done an employee survey, what do they like about working for you as a smaller organisation? Take that data and leverage that into your recruitment process, your onboarding process, and retention throughout the employee life cycle. It's a great question, that.
Thanks, Michelle. Next question is an organisation, and they've said that they've had a situation where a manager has left and then a large proportion of the team have also left to follow the manager in their new role. And it's really just how to deal with the result of that in terms of culture and in terms of how that might be deemed as concerning for other employees at the business.
Yeah, that is a tough situation. I think I know this situation's already happened, but one thing I would recommend for going forward is to look at your contracts and look at any clauses that you can put in place, so that if a manager does leave, that there's a time frame that they would be able to approach other staff to go and work for them. So it's certainly worth getting your contracts looked at in terms of those kind of restrictive clauses in a legal and fair way for going forward. These things do happen even in good organisations, because sometimes people value the actual manager they've got more than the overall organisation. I think it would be key to talk to the people who are still here, and whether that's through an anonymous engagement survey or whether that's through some kind of working group, to understand what their feelings are. It can be a very difficult situation to manage, but I think the key would be to try and find out why these employees have left and chosen to go with that manager rather than stay with the organisation. And then that would give you addressable actions. It's a very tough conversation and topic to have, but in some ways it's one of those that needs to be addressed, because if the organisation just try and pretend it's not happening, that could cause more issues. But if there was, this is like, I want to think about this in terms of my overall retention strategies, then it may be worth talking to your HR team or to your HR outsource provider to think about how you could build that whole retention strategy going forward and use this as an opportunity to improve things.
Thanks, Michelle. So next question. 4 years ago, our business significantly reduced the holiday and company sick pay terms for new starters. Although pay rates are aligned for all, the long-standing employees in the company that have been there for 20 years or more, for example, are significantly better off in terms of additional holiday and additional sick pay cover. Obviously, this is causing dissatisfaction and leads to the likelihood of reduced retention rates. How could we rectify this?
Yeah, that's a really tough situation, because there was obviously a business, probably financial reason why that decision was made to reduce some of the terms for those employees. I think if that decision's been made and cannot be reversed for whatever reason, or the business does not want to reverse that decision, I think you've got to look at what other things you can put in place around that to try and encourage the newer starters to stay. You do get many businesses where there are historic reasons why people are on high salaries, or they've got certain better terms and conditions. That can generally be just, part of the course of a long-standing business. But think about those 3 R's around retention, respect, reward, and recognition. And again, think about it in terms of your overall retention strategy. What things can you put in place if that decision still stands? What are the other things that you can put in place that you feel would encourage those people to stay beyond just those basic terms and conditions? Because it is, and it can be so much broader.
Thanks, Michelle. So probably moving on to final question now. So final question, we've got a large segment of employees that will be reaching retirement age at the same time in approximately 5 years' time. So what can we do now to plan for that?
Yeah, this is about overall strategies around headcount, and it's really good that you're thinking about it so early on. I think one of the things to remember with retirement is that people will choose to retire at different times, so don't assume that all people that you think are going to retire at a particular time will retire at that time. There isn't an ability to force retirement, and it is very much down to the individual. And I certainly speak from experience of our own teams of having that level of knowledge and experience in your team from people who have worked in the industry for a long time and bring a lot of skills. There is benefits to having people working beyond what was a traditional retirement date. So first of all, think about that. You may not get all those people leaving at the same time. What you need to do, though, is try and plan effectively, and data will help you do this, and data in a system. You can think about potentially kind of double counting headcount for a particular time so that you know that you've got cover, that when these people who you think maybe retire and actually do decide to retire, that you've already got people in the business and trained up. Is there a way that you can do that in advance? If not, that is quite difficult because you can't bring other people in to just step into that vacancy, or they're already there. But then what you need to do is think about how you are going to distribute that work around the rest of the team, look across the whole team, see where you might need to transfer skills, knowledge and experience now, and use these next 5 years to get the rest of the team up to speed with what other people are doing, so that it will lessen the impact when you actually get that notice of retirement and you know when they're leaving. And then the other thing is just, to have open and honest conversations with your employees. Make sure they know that they can come to you with any questions and queries, but be very careful never to try and force people to tell you when they are thinking of retiring in the future.
Thank you, Michelle. We'll wrap the Q&A up there. Lots of really interesting points covered. So before we finish our session today, I will point you in the direction of our Knowledge Centre. You can access the Knowledge Centre from the homepage on our website. And in here, you'll find details of upcoming webinars, guides, blogs. There's actually a recruitment and retention section there where you will find lots of useful resources if you would like to do some further reading. And in terms of next steps, there's some information here about the HR support that we offer. At the end of the session, a pop-up will come up on your screen and you can put your details in there if you would like us to contact you to find out more about our HR software and services. Our HR advice line runs 24/7, 365 days a year. So no matter when a HR issue crops up, best practice employment law advice is always available over the phone by our team of highly experienced qualified experts. So like I say, either drop me a message in the chat or you can answer the poll at the end of the session if you would like to find out more. So that's everything from us today. I will be sending out the slides and recording later on today. Thank you for everyone who joined our webinar this morning. And thank you very much to Michelle for hosting. It was a really fantastic session and I'm sure everyone found it useful. So I'll close the webinar off now and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.